Good morning, evening, or night. Wherever you are, welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world. One quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Thursday, 1st May, 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. United States faces economic headwinds as Moody's downgrades its credit rating due to rising debt and persistent fiscal deficits, a move the White House disputes by criticizing Moody's economist Mark Zandi. Simultaneously, concerns grow over potential conflicts of interest tied to former President Trump's receipt of overseas gifts and targeted investments, raising the specter of unconstitutional pay for access. Further complicating matters, a senior U.S. Democrat has criticized the Trump administration's rollback of an AI rule, arguing it could indirectly benefit China by allowing Saudi Arabia and the UAE to supply advanced chips to Beijing. In a move to bolster national pride, the U.S. plans to launch an immigrant reality TV show centered on the path to citizenship, where contestants will compete in challenges designed to demonstrate their understanding of American values. In law enforcement news, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement has announced the first terrorism charges for providing support to a Mexican cartel. Severe storms across the Midwestern U.S. have caused widespread devastation, resulting in at least 21 deaths in Missouri and Kentucky. Tornadoes were reported in Wisconsin, and a heat wave is affecting Texas. Thousands remain without power as a result of the storms. Turning to Mexico, Maria del Rosario Navarro, a 39-year-old Mexican woman, has been indicted in the U.S. for allegedly conspiring to provide material support to the Jalisco New Generation cartel. The U.S. Department of Justice, which has designated CGNJ as a foreign terrorist organization, accuses Navarro of supplying grenades to the cartel. Meanwhile, in China, the U.S.-China trade truce has brought a temporary sense of calm to stock markets, though the underlying economic health of both nations remains a concern. The threat of delisting for U.S.-listed Chinese companies could potentially benefit Hong Kong markets. Shifting focus to Vatican City, genealogists have discovered that Pope Leo XIV's paternal grandfather, John R. Prevost, immigrated to the U.S. from northeastern Sicily. This revelation follows the earlier discovery that Pope Leo's maternal grandparents came to the U.S. from the Caribbean and identified as Black. Back in the United States, the Mayo Clinic is leveraging its fecal waste biobank to explore how the microbiome impacts cancer patients' responses to medications. This research is part of a broader effort to personalize medicine through understanding the microbiome's role in drug efficacy. Former U.S. President Donald Trump recently concluded a tour of the Gulf region, sparking conversations about whether this visit signals a new phase in a Gulf relation. In Israel, renewed conflict in Gaza has triggered a major Israeli offensive, Operation Gideon's Chariots, with the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, announcing the initial stages. The operation aims to seize strategic areas, achieve all war goals, and secure the release of hostages, accompanied by gunfire and intensified airstrikes. Since Thursday, Israeli strikes have killed over 300 people in Gaza, with over 100 deaths reported on May 16 alone. Local authorities reported more than 250 deaths since Thursday morning. Over 140 Palestinians were killed in 24 hours, with at least 115 killed since Friday amid intensified attacks. The escalating strikes have prompted accusations of ethnic cleansing and widespread forced starvation, exacerbated by a total Israeli blockade on humanitarian aid for over 2 months. Aid groups warn of imminent famine, and a Gaza volunteer described the situation as shocking, citing severe food and medical shortages, including a lack of basic supplies, like soap and morphine. Thousands of Palestinians are fleeing North Gaza due to the intensified attacks. Hamas has confirmed the resumption of Gaza ceasefire talks, with official Taher al-Nono stating that both sides are discussing all issues without preconditions. Donald Trump acknowledged the starvation in Gaza, stating that the U.S. would address the situation, while in Abu Dhabi, during his Gulf tour, he noted the collapse of humanitarian support in the enclave. Israel also struck Yemen's Red Sea ports of Hodeidah and Salif, continuing its campaign to degrade Houthi military capabilities and warning that the group's top leader could be a target. Yuval Raphael, a Hamas attack survivor from the Nova Festival on October 7, 2023, is representing Israel at Eurovision, performing the pop ballad New Day Will Rise, sparking protests due to the Gaza war. Meanwhile, the Arab League convened in Baghdad, Iraq, to address the carnage in Gaza and other regional crises, with the Israeli offensive dominating the agenda. Before the summit, Iran's Al-Quds Force Commander Esmail Ghani visited Baghdad to convey support for Iranian-American negotiations and to demand the lifting of sanctions on Iran. According to an Iraqi political official, India is dedicated to reinforcing its relationship with Afghanistan, vowing to take all required measures following Minister S. Jaishankar's talks with his Afghan counterpart. The Indian government is also mulling over providing assistance to Afghans expelled by Pakistan. India is facing accusations of inhumane treatment of Rohingya refugees, specifically forcing them into the sea near Myanmar with just life jackets, which the United Nations is calling for an investigation into. UNHCR reports that at least 40 refugees, including children and the elderly, were given life jackets and cast adrift near the India-Myanmar border. Indian media outlets are also under scrutiny, with some accused of amplifying falsehoods and reporting unverified information during the conflict between India and Pakistan. Within India, industries like yarn and steel are concerned about a potential increase in cheap Chinese imports due to the U.S.-China trade war, fearing they will be unable to compete as Chinese companies divert exports away from the United States. Turning to India-Pakistan relations, the United Kingdom and the United States are committed to working towards a lasting ceasefire between the two nations, indicating their continued involvement in the Kashmir issue. This aligns with previous statements from President Trump regarding his administration's role in brokering a ceasefire. President Trump has stated that stopping the conflict between India and Pakistan is a significant achievement, despite the Indian government's stance that the Directors General of Military Operations, DZMOs, of both countries reached an understanding to cease hostility. The UK Foreign Secretary, Lammy, has affirmed the UK's dedication to improving relations between India and Pakistan and combating terrorism, emphasizing the close ties that both nations share with the UK. Finally, regarding United States trade relations, President Trump has stated that India is willing to eliminate all tariffs for the United States, describing India as one of the highest tariff nations globally, and suggesting that trade is used as a tool for negotiation and conflict resolution. He has also said that he is in no rush and is not planning to make deals with everybody. Iran is grappling with a significant energy and economic crisis exacerbated by concerns about potential water shortages, while simultaneously navigating complex international relations and nuclear negotiations. Despite rebukes from Iranian leaders toward U.S. President Trump for his disgraceful remarks and corruption accusations, Iran maintains it will continue nuclear talks with the U.S. regarding its rapidly advancing nuclear program, asserting it will not concede its rights due to U.S. threats. Iran insists on its right to nuclear enrichment, rejecting any deal that would prohibit it, a stance opposed by U.S. conservatives. Recent nuclear talks were held with European powers in Turkey, and Tehran indicated it may hold further discussions with the E3 European parties to the 2015 deal along with China, Russia, and the United States, if required. Trump stated that the U.S. has presented Iran with an American proposal regarding its nuclear program. Shifting to the United Kingdom, 3 Iranian men, Mustafa Sepavan, Farhad Javadi Manesh, and Shapoor Ali Khani Nouri, have been charged under the National Security Act for allegedly assisting the Iranian Foreign Intelligence Service. They appeared before Westminster Magistrates Court. The Metropolitan Police Force charged them with engaging in conduct likely to assist a foreign intelligence service between August 14, 2024, and February 16, 2025, following an investigation by counter-terror detectives. Ukraine remains embattled as the first direct Russia-Ukraine peace talks since the early weeks of the 2022 invasion ended swiftly, failing to secure a ceasefire or a leaders' meeting, underscoring deep divisions. Immediately following negotiations, a Russian drone struck a passenger bus in Ukraine's Sumy region, resulting in 9 fatalities and 4 injuries. President Volodymyr Zelensky denounced the attack as a deliberate act against civilians and urged increased sanctions on Moscow. The bus was evacuating civilians, primarily elderly women, from a frontline area. Despite the breakdown in broader negotiations, both sides did agree to a prisoner of war exchange. Reports indicate some Russian soldiers are fatigued by the war, yet maintain a desire to conquer more Ukrainian territory, potentially creating nationalist pressure on the Kremlin if a ceasefire were implemented along current front lines. Turning to Australia, Canberra has strongly condemned Russia's sentencing of Australian Oscar Jenkins, 33, who fought for Ukraine. Jenkins was convicted of being a mercenary in an armed conflict by a court in the Russian-occupied Luhansk region of eastern Ukraine. In the United States, Donald Trump has suggested he could meet with Russia's Vladimir Putin to negotiate an end to the Ukraine war, stating that there can't be a meeting without me, after pulling back from first direct peace talks in Putin's absence. Russia's ongoing conflict with Ukraine saw direct peace talks in Istanbul result in an agreement for a 1,000 for 1,000 prisoner swap, the largest of the war to date, while a ceasefire remains elusive. Ukraine is actively lobbying allies to sustain pressure on Russia, rejecting what it deems unacceptable conditions. Tragically, hours after the talks, a Russian drone strike in Ukraine's Sumy region killed 9, an act labeled a cynical war crime by Ukrainian National Police. Vladimir Medinsky, Russia's lead negotiator, referenced Peter the Great's war against Sweden, suggesting a prolonged conflict is possible. New parents in the Ukrainian city of Sloviansk, enduring over a decade of Russian assault, face difficult choices. Former US Ambassador Bridget Brink criticized the Trump administration's policy of pressuring Ukraine instead of Russia, stating she resigned due to this perceived appeasement. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is navigating limited options, leveraging support from both the US and Europe. Turning to the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer believes Britons have moved past Brexit. However, residents in Thurrock, a pro-Brexit area, feel misled. Starmer aims to reset the UK's relationship with the EU to boost economic growth. UK police have charged 3 Iranian men with espionage, accusing them of assisting a foreign intelligence service. The UK government might delay recognizing a Palestinian state, awaiting France's potential move at a UN conference. In France, British officials doubt Emmanuel Macron will recognize a Palestinian state next month at a UN conference. This move by France would be the first such action by a G7 nation. Meanwhile, in the United States, former US Ambassador Bridget Brink has accused the Trump administration of pressuring Ukraine instead of Russia. Also, former President Trump arrived in the United Arab Emirates after a campaign-style speech at the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. The U.S. Supreme Court has repeatedly blocked the Trump administration's attempts to deport Venezuelan migrants using the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. The court initially rejected lifting a block on deportations, citing inadequate legal process in an emergency appeal. This decision concerned Venezuelan, men accused of gang membership, held in Texas. The Supreme Court later indefinitely extended the prohibition on these deportations. Allegations also surfaced that Joe Kent, an acting chief of staff in national intelligence, pressured an analyst to revise an assessment of the Venezuelan government's relationship with a gang. This revision allegedly supported a White House narrative used to justify the deportation law. DHC lawyers hired by Venezuela claim that 252 deported Venezuelans imprisoned in El Salvador have been subjected to physical and emotional torture. The lawyers also report being unable to visit their clients in prison. In Venezuela, the opposition has encouraged voters to boycott upcoming regional elections. This strategy has caused division within the party, including among prominent political families. Japan's space agency, JAXA, remains dedicated to lunar missions, despite proposed budget cuts to NASA's Artemis program. In healthcare, the FDA has approved Fujifilm Biodiagnostics blood test for diagnosing Alzheimer's in symptomatic individuals aged 55 and above. Nissan Motor Company is considering closing 2 plants in Kanagawa Prefecture as part of its restructuring efforts, while the government plans to release rice stockpiles to lower consumer prices. The rainy season in southern Kyushu began earlier than any other region since 1951. Regarding defense, Japanese officials recovered the remains of a missing crew member after a military training aircraft crash. Japan is also reconsidering its knife ownership laws, drawing lessons from the UK's ban on ninja swords. Finally, Japanese officials are requesting contributions from Mount Fuji climbers to help cover off-season rescue expenses, following incidents such as the rescue of a Chinese student. Australia has strongly denounced Russia's sham trial of Melbourne resident Oscar Jenkins, sentencing him to 13 years for allegedly fighting as a mercenary in Ukraine. Foreign Affairs Minister Penny Wong insists Russia treat Jenkins humanely as a prisoner of war. Internal government documents show a high rate of emergency animal euthanasia is happening at Australian export abattoirs post-transport. Curtin University research points to long inspection times, averaging nearly 11 hours, as a contributing factor. McDonald's faces declining sales in Australia as consumers seek cheaper alternatives like burritos or charcoal chicken, creating greater market competition. Meanwhile, South Australia is witnessing a surge in shark sightings and strandings, concurrent with an extended toxic algal bloom. A recent shark bite occurred at Port Noarlunga Beach. Although some suspect the algal bloom influences shark behavior, experts caution against premature conclusions before toxicology reports are available. United Arab Emirates is set to become a hub for AI infrastructure, as OpenAI plans to partner with the nation to create a massive data center. The UAE notably welcomed former President Trump at the Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque in Abu Dhabi, underscoring diplomatic ties in the region. Turning to Gaza and the wider Arab world, a strong push for a ceasefire is underway, with Arab nations promising support for Gaza's reconstruction. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has voiced strong condemnation of Israel's actions in Gaza, describing them as systematic crimes aiming at the obliteration and annihilation of the Palestinian people. China sees General Motors China Inc. restructuring its Durant Guild imported car unit due to high tariffs on U.S.-made vehicles. A new strain of bacteria was discovered on China's Tiangong space station, potentially impacting future space travel. Chinese scientists are improving high-altitude drone performance using plasma excitation technology, enhancing flight duration. The Policing Tech Expo in China displayed advanced AI-driven surveillance tools targeting Telegram and VPN users. China has decreased its holdings of US Treasury bonds, now ranking as the 3rd largest foreign holder. Ori Capital is launching a $350 fund for Chinese biotech anticipating AI-driven market success. Fu Zai, China's first police corgi and a social media sensation with 400,000 followers, forfeited his bonus due to a lack of self-control. Poland is gearing up for a crucial presidential election that will shape the nation's political future. With incumbent President Duda's second term concluding, the election's result will determine whether the existing political deadlock persists or a new course is charted. The current centrist parliamentary coalition government sees the election as a referendum on dismantling populism, requiring presidential support to undo perceived democratic erosion by the prior administration. The Polish government is experiencing anxiety due to declining approval ratings, coupled with the current president's obstruction of reforms. While left-wing candidates are expected to perform better than in past elections, a dramatic shift is not anticipated. Rafał Trzaskowski, the liberal mayor of Warsaw, is campaigning while distributing Polish flags, seeking to cultivate a patriotic image. European leaders are coordinating with the U.S. on a unified response to stalled truce talks between Russia and Ukraine. This joint approach involves potential new sanctions against Russia. Separately, several European nations are advocating for a change in Israeli policy regarding Gaza. Specifically, 7 nations are urging Israel to resume the entry of essential goods, which has been blocked since March 2. North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, is heavily focused on military readiness, directing Air Force drills and anti-aircraft exercises. He has called for all military units to achieve a breakthrough in war preparation. Meanwhile, 2 North Korean fishermen who drifted south months ago wish to return, but Pyongyang has yet to acknowledge communication regarding their return. Bolivia saw renewed protests as supporters of Evo Morales clashed with law enforcement in La Paz. Demonstrators marched toward the electoral court, demanding Morales' inclusion on the ballot for the presidential elections slated for August 17. The Constitutional Court's ruling against his candidacy fueled the unrest. Mexico sees its citizens navigating strict gun control measures, as evidenced by a man's journey to Mexico City to legally purchase a rifle from a military-operated store. The Culture Secretary is considering legal action against a production company that filmed a mobeast video at the Chichen Itza Maya ruins, citing regulatory breaches. Furthermore, Mexico confronts a grave issue of femicide, with 852 cases recorded in 2023, a rate recognized by the UN as among the highest in Latin America, and the death of influencer Valeria Marquez bringing additional public attention to the crisis. South Africa recently saw Elon Musk's XI address concerns regarding its chatbot Grok, which generated misleading posts about white genocide in the country. The company attributed this to an unauthorized modification. In a separate incident, a mass shooting near Durban claimed the lives of 8 people, prompting a police investigation and manhunt to uncover the motives behind the attack. Meanwhile, the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria became the focal point of a rally by white South Africans, highlighting some of the factors that previously shaped the Trump administration's critical view of the nation. Thailand's Abbott Prathamatiranawat of what Raiking faces serious allegations. The Central Investigation Bureau, SIB, arrested him. He is suspected of embezzling over 300 million baht, equivalent to $9.05 million, from the temple's bank account. This arrest has sent shockwaves through the Buddhist community. Brazil confirmed its first bird flu outbreak in commercial poultry, triggering an immediate ban on poultry shipments to China. This is a major blow, considering Brazil is the world's largest poultry exporter. The nation exported $1 billion in chicken meat last year, accounting for roughly 35% of global trade. Pakistan is advocating for renewed comprehensive discussions with India to resolve ongoing disputes. Simultaneously, the Director Generals of military operations from both Pakistan and India are slated to reconnect on May 18th, potentially easing military tension. Bosnia and Herzegovina's ammunition manufacturers in Gorazde are facing potential hardship. This is due to tariffs levied by the United States, threatening their competitiveness. Turning to Canada, the newly appointed American ambassador, Pete Hoekstra, has signaled a positive outlook regarding relations between the two nations. However, he offered no specific time frame for the possible lifting of tariffs currently imposed by the United States. In the United Arab Emirates, a strategic shift is underway as the nation increases its involvement in Africa. This expansion includes investments, aid initiatives, and a broader overall presence occurring as the United States and other major economic players reduce their engagement on the continent. Amidst global trade tensions, Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation nations engaged U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer in South Korea, voicing concerns about the impact of U.S. tariffs. Shifting focus to South Korea, President Yoon Suk-yeol stepped down from his political party. He did so in anticipation of upcoming snap polls. Yoon encouraged support for Kim Moon-soo as his potential successor. Gulf states are signaling increased confidence in Syria's government. They recently paid $15.50 million towards Syria's debt to the World Bank. This payment follows President Trump's Middle East tour. The tour included lavish receptions in Gulf capitals. It also fostered a shift in relations with Syria. Multi-billion-dollar agreements were signed, benefiting U.S. companies. Chad saw the arrest of former Prime Minister and opposition leader Sakseh Masra, accused of inciting violence. This action followed Masra's campaign activities in N'Djamena the prior year, raising concerns about government suppression of political opposition. Slovenia has seen its bronze statue of Melania Trump vanish after being cut off at the ankles. This follows a prior incident in 2019 where a wooden statue of the former First Lady, situated near her hometown of Sevnica, was intentionally burned. The police are currently investigating the statue's disappearance. Romania's upcoming presidential election. Rerun is poised to be a defining moment, potentially reshaping the nation's politically fractured landscape. Many Romanian voters are eager for change, and some are placing their hopes on George Simion, anticipating improvements in living standards and greater financial accessibility. The election's result will be crucial, possibly setting a new course for the country. New Zealand is bracing for hazardous conditions as severe weather warnings are issued across the country, forecasting heavy rainfall, potential thunderstorms, and gale-force winds gusting up to 120 km/h. In other news from New Zealand, a University of Otago study reveals that approximately 40,000 citizens are affected by a parasite transmitted by cats, raising concerns about potential permanent vision damage. Portugal is facing a snap general election due to scrutiny surrounding Prime Minister Luis Montenegro's family business dealings, with immigration and housing emerging as the pivotal issues. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's ruling Fidesz party is under fire for a proposed transparency law, with critics suggesting it could stifle political dissent and critical media. In Germany, newly appointed Chancellor Friedrich Merz is scheduled to meet with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni in Rome, while the FDP party has recently appointed a new leader following disappointing election results. The Netherlands has inaugurated Phoenix, a new art museum in Rotterdam dedicated to exploring migration through art and artifacts, housed in a revamped pier stockroom featuring a striking steel double helix swirl. Meanwhile, between Sweden and Turkey, journalist Joachim Eden has been released from Turkish prison after being jailed for allegedly insulting President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, while covering protests related to the arrest of Istanbul Mayor Ekrem Imamoglu. Turning to Libya, ministers have resigned amid ongoing protests demanding the government's removal, triggered by the death of a militia commander and subsequent deadly clashes, including the killing of a police officer. In a matter involving Qatar, the UAE, and the United States, Democrats are attempting to block over $3 billion in weapons sales to Qatar and the UAE, citing concerns about a reported $400 in luxury Boeing jet allegedly offered to former President Trump. Focusing on Malaysia, fish hunters are actively engaged in targeting invasive fish species, a response to the escalating threat posed by imported fish to the country's waterways. Shifting to Singapore and Indonesia, Indonesia has voiced concerns over Singapore's elevated fuel prices, announcing plans to transition to US imports due to its own limited refining capacity and heavy reliance on Singapore for fuel. Separately, an Indian tourist named Pramenda was jailed in Singapore for molesting a 12-year-old girl and soliciting her to follow him into a swimming pool toilet. Cambodia has commenced exporting durians to China, with the ambition of competing with Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia in the lucrative Chinese market. Botswana's Tebogo is determined to challenge the dominance of American and Jamaican sprinters, expressing his Olympic aspirations and his vision for the future of sprinting in Africa. In international affairs, the ICC's chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, has temporarily stepped aside due to allegations of sexual misconduct, which are currently under investigation by the UN. Finally, Liana McClinton, with heritage from Tonga and Samoa, became the first Polynesian athlete to win the 100 EM and 200 EM state titles at a Florida high school meet. And Luma Novade Mwinilaban's career is celebrated for her aspirational work for Pacific people, emphasizing community over individual gain within the Polynesian diaspora. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.